People, Trump order of 48 hours has been retracted. Yes, has been retracted. He's back down. He started war with Iran without considering the consequences. We're all feeling the pinch since it started. And then he starts threatening Iran, said he's going to hit the power grid after hitting the Rainbow Island. And now he's saying Iran and the USA are having successful talks. The only thing is, Iran have denied this fact. They're winning this war. They're winning this war and will win this war quite easily. Quite easily. Shouldn't have started this war in the first place. Let's have a check and see what's on the news, people. Another 48 hours.
together. I am pleased to report that the United States of America and the country of Iran have had over the last 2 days very good and productive conversations regarding a complete and total resolution of our hostilities in the Middle East. Based on the tenor and tone of these in-depth, detailed, and constructive conversations, which will continue throughout the week, I have instructed the Department of War to postpone any and all military strikes against Iranian power plants and energy infrastructure for a 5-day period, subject to the success of the ongoing meetings and discussions. Thank you for your attention to this matter, President Donald J. Trump. So this is a lengthy message. We're going to keep this up on the screen for a moment longer. There's a lot here to unpack. Now, remember, we are only hours away, or were, just up until this moment, only hours away from the end of a 48-hour deadline that Donald Trump had imposed on Iran. That deadline was very specific and very simple. Donald Trump had told Iran to reopen the Strait of Hormuz within 48 hours of me sending of the very minute when Donald Trump had sent his last Truth Social message, reopen it within 48 hours, or the U.S. would bomb Iran's power plants, which could have been a major escalation in this conflict. And Iran had already responded by saying no, by saying that it wasn't going to abide by this deadline, it wasn't going to reopen the Strait of Hormuz, and if its power plants were bombed, Iran would respond by bombing power plants in Israel and in Gulf countries across the region. So we were looking at a possible serious escalation between the U.S. and Iran. And now we have this message from the U.S. president saying he is halting this for 5 days. That's one takeaway from this message. The other very important takeaway from this message is the first part of it. Reread this. The United States of America and the country of Iran have had over the last 2 days very good and productive conversations regarding a complete and total resolution of our hostilities in the Middle East. So Donald Trump is telling us that there are talks, which is a marked departure from what has been the case, at least what was known publicly up until, but I don't want to talk to them. Iran had denied that they were talking to the United States. Now the US president, writing in all caps, there are conversations actually happening. They are in depth and they are going well, and they could lead to an off-ramp. All of this happening right now in a message posted by the President of the United States to his social media just moments ago. Al Jazeera's Zain Basravi is in Dubai. Zain, we were going to have a different conversation than the one we now have to read is honestly of this 48-hour deadline. Just reading the words here. That deadline has now been suspended for 5 days, and Donald Trump is offering an I don't want to wrongfully or wrongly characterize this. Donald Trump is suggesting, Dane, that there could be, at the end of this, an off-ramp for this conflict.
It's so easy to become a party to record.
This is an exciting moment, but then again, and I'll say this and then we'll move on to some more optimistic talk. There could be another post in 5 minutes that completely turns this one upside down. Having said that, it is in all caps. It is Donald Trump being very, very clear and precise in terms of what is being discussed. And it is perhaps, if you look at the timeline of events of the last 12 to 24 hours, it makes a little bit of sense that this is the direction things are going in, because if they were going in the other direction, it would have been much more dire. Let's look at something that the Iranians said not that long ago. Iran's National Defense Council says any attempt to attack the Iranian coast or islands will cause all communication lines in the Persian Gulf to be mined. They said this after the threat and the 48-hour deadline that Donald Trump imposed. And let's look at what this says. The communication lines is an old naval term to describe strategic maritime sea routes, so sea lanes. And what the Iranians had suggested is that they would expand the conflict with naval mines being sent in, not just to the Strait of Hormuz, but across the Gulf. That is the threat that they had made. That would have expanded the naval battle to the nth degree. It would have been something that would have expanded beyond the control of any of the actors that are currently taking part in the conflict, and would have spelled almost certain long-term dire consequences for the Gulf Arab countries that have been caught up in the middle of this since before the war began. So it seems as though if we take Donald Trump's Truth Social post at face value, perhaps cooler heads have prevailed. Perhaps strategically, people have seen what military strategists and certainly leadership here on the ground have been saying all along, that the longer this war goes on, the less possible it is to see any winners, any outcome in this other than negative for really everyone involved. It was becoming difficult to see anyone emerging from this victorious in the long run. The dire consequences for the American economy, for the economic situation on a global stage, certainly for the players on the ground. They were being bombarded. Israel has taken heavy hits. Iran obviously has come out the worst impacted. For the U.S. economy and for U.S. interests in the region, it's been nothing but negative. And for the GCC, all they've been is a target for Iran's retaliation. So looking at this post for at face value, which is certainly something leaders here will be hoping is the case, that they can take it as it has been said here. Perhaps this is a U-turn in this conflict into its fourth week. Perhaps this is a pivot point, stepping away from violence, stepping more towards the negotiating table. Maybe there is a way out now, and there does seem to be dialogue happening between the Iranians and the Americans, if Donald Trump is to be believed.
Zain Basravi in Dubai, thank you very much for the instant reporting and reaction on this latest message, Truth Social message by the U.S. president. Now, we're going to read it again. A word of context. I was sitting in this seat in June of last year when the president posted a comparable message that ended up ending what is now known as the 12-day war between the U.S., Israel, and Iran. We are again in a new war, which has now lasted 3 weeks between the U.S., Israel, and Iran, similar protagonists. And here's the message. I am pleased to report that the United States of America and the country of Iran have had, over the last 2 days, very good and productive conversations based on the tenor and tone of these in-depth, detailed, and constructive conversations, which will continue throughout the week. I have instructed the Department of War to postpone any and all military strikes against the Iranian power plants and energy infrastructure for a 5-day period, subject to the success of the ongoing meetings and discussions. Well, Al Jazeera's Osama bin Javed joins us now on set to discuss this. Mohammed El-Masri is also with us in the studio as well. Mohammed, first of all, credit to you. Less than an hour ago, you were telling me I was making the case Donald Trump has painted himself into a corner. Maybe he now has to attack Iran. And you were saying we've seen Donald Trump walk away from direct and specific threats before. This is, if not a total walk back, at least a partial and momentary walk back at the very least.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of people in the region and beyond that are breathing huge sighs of relief right now. I mentioned when we were speaking about an hour ago that it was my hope that there would be advisors in Donald Trump's ear, perhaps Gulf leaders in his ear, suggesting to him that this would be catastrophic. Not just a war crime, collective punishment, but that it would lead to disastrous consequences for so many people. So, I read that message with some hope, not only for the here and now regarding the power plants, but also that perhaps there is a light at the end of the tunnel and that we could get an end to the war, because he says there that they are in ongoing discussions. So that's if we want to be more optimistic. On the other hand, he doesn't announce in that message an end to the war, and there are other variables at play. Israel and the Iranians. There's certainly no guarantee that even if the Americans and the Israelis, for that matter, stop attacking Iran, that the Iranians will stop.
Yeah, you raise a very important point there, because the Iranians have said in recent days, it is not in the U.S.'s power to unilaterally end this war. They may declare victory on social media. The Iranians actually said this, right, at multiple levels of the state and the IRGC and the military. They've said the U.S. president may tweet at any point in time that the war is over, that won't mean that the war will necessarily be over because we have our say in this. Osama, Donald Trump is signaling that there are, if not negotiations, I'll use his word, very good and productive conversations between, we don't know exactly who, we don't know if it's direct or indirect, but somehow the US and Iran are communicating. You had followed their negotiations and reported on them before the war, the indirect talks that they were having in Geneva. And now after 3 weeks of war, they're communicating again.
Well, what I can tell you is based on conversations with various diplomats, ever since this 48-hour deadline was issued by Trump, the phones have not stopped ringing. Remember, this was Eid holiday in the Gulf when this deadline was issued. And despite this being a holiday, multiple countries on multiple levels, whether it is their embassies and consulates in Europe or in Washington, D.C., or direct conversations between the White House and various leaders of the Gulf have been had. People have been telling us that they've been trying to tell the Trump administration that this process of annihilation does not bode well either for Iran, the region, or for Israel. Now, there are multiple factors that you have to take into account. One is the threat that Donald Trump issued. Second, the missile
hitting their
strike,
power plants.
Of hitting the power plants and energy infrastructure across Iran. Look at how Iran has been responding in a tit-for-tat attack on the way the attacks have followed in Iran. In the last 48 hours, it has changed patterns of its strikes, the locations it's been hitting in Israel, the impact that it has been having. It is
180 people injured some 36 hours ago.
Unheard of in previous conflicts, right? And you see this 3 weeks after declarations that Iran's been destroyed 90%, missile launches destroyed 80%, production capacity is destroyed by that percent. 3 weeks into that, Iran announces it. Now, look at the trajectory here. Iran announces that it will hit 1, 2, 3, 4. And it successfully hits those targets, despite all the infrastructure, military infrastructure that is there. Despite all the rhetoric and threats, the Strait of Hormuz is still closed. Despite everything that has been said to calm the markets, whether it's the release of 400 million barrels of oil from strategic reserves or the use of navies to escort ships to a fund that would ensure ships, nobody's crossing the Strait of Hormuz. And that is why this is taking a real toll, not just in the Gulf. As the Qatari Minister for Energy said, this has the potential to take down global economies. So it has been having that impact. Those conversations have been had, and it appears that some sense is prevailing.
You make such a key point, I think, which is that both sides, when they issue threats now, given their track record, those threats are instantly credible. I mean, when the U.S. threatens to destroy infrastructure in Iran, they've been doing that for 3 weeks. They have the ability to do it, they have the will to do it, and they've been doing it. And when the Iranians say, we'll hit your energy, we'll hit your nuclear sites, they've also had the ability to do it, and they have been doing it. Let's bring in Al Jazeera's Alan Fisher, our chief U.S. correspondent. Alan, it's only moments ago that this message was written and posted by the U.S. president, so I'm not going to ask you to speculate about what is in the mind of this president, but I would like you to help us maybe read this and what this is and what this isn't. This isn't an end to the war, but it does feel, at least in the moment, significant.
We do full fibre broadband, so you can do life. Hyper optic, full fibre that's in your corner.
EVE Online is a vast universe, alive with the unrelenting activity and combined.
Well, a couple of things to point out here. One, that feeling you've got at the moment is whiplash from Donald Trump, who 72 hours ago was saying there would absolutely be no deal, who less than 48 hours ago was promising complete and utter annihilation, is now saying that there'll be an end to the war for 5 days while they allow talks to continue. So clearly something has happened in private over the last 48 hours, as you've been hearing. There's obviously been pressure on Donald Trump. And one of the things might be, as someone pointed out to me on Saturday evening when we were talking about this on air, threatening to attack civilian infrastructure such as power plants is a war crime. And Donald Trump announced that he was going to do this in the full blaze of his own social media platform. Here's the other thing. Donald Trump has been looking for an off-ramp. He doesn't quite see how he gets out of this. He understands that it's impacting the economy very badly. And of course, he was the president that promised that prices would come down, life would be cheaper, everyone's life would be better. And also he knows that MAGA were deeply concerned. His own part of the Republican Party deeply worried about the idea of a war that seems to go on and on and on in the Middle East, something he campaigned against. And the talk of putting troops on the ground, well, Donald Trump said, oh, I would never balk at the idea of that. MAGA did. They were concerned about it. They were deeply worried about the idea of American troops fighting on foreign soil, particularly where the Iranians didn't seem to have any sense that they were going to give up, that they were fighting for their own survival. And so this was something that factored into all of this. So this may be convenient. If the Iranians opened up talks through a third party to discuss the possibility of opening up the Strait of Hormuz, then that's maybe something that Donald Trump wanted to do to give him the off-ramp. Here's another thing just to make the point. Donald Trump, Iran oil has been sanctioned since 1996. Such was the concern about the oil prices, Donald Trump lifted the sanctions on Iranian oil. Someone who he essentially given them a chance to fund the war. And so there needed to be an off-ramp. This might be the convenient off-ramp for Donald Trump. He might now be able to say, we won. And to a degree he has. He's destroyed the Navy, the Air Force, his aerial superiority in Iran. He has done a great deal of damage to their missile program. He can claim he's won and walk away and let the rebuilding process begin. But clearly there has to be progress in the next 5 days. That is something that satisfies him so that the war doesn't restart.
Alan, I think you're raising something that is key. You're saying Donald Trump could walk away at this point and claim a victory. And it is true that the military objectives that have been set out, especially by Pete Hegseth, the U.S. Defense Secretary, and by Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State and National Security Advisor, those objectives have been fairly narrow, and they've been go after the missiles, go after the drones, go after the Navy, the Air Force. All those things have been done and cripple Iran's ability to resume its nuclear activity. If Donald Trump were to somehow end this conflict and say, I've checked all those boxes, that would be accurate at this point, wouldn't it?
Well, he's got a win in that he has degraded the weapons program, no doubt about that. He's destroyed the Navy, but he didn't remove the threat in the Strait of Hormuz the way that he thought he might or hoped he could. He destroyed, by and large, the Iranian Air Force. They have aerial dominance. But of course, one of the things he talked about on that Saturday morning when he announced that the war had started was the change in regime. He wanted the people of Iran to rise up and overthrow the mullahs. That hasn't happened. That it didn't occur the way that he thought it would occur. There weren't millions of people on the street suddenly demanding change. There was no room, no area for them to protest and overthrow the government. And so people will point to that and say, this is not, you haven't achieved what you wanted to do, which was to change the direction of Iran as a country. There is no change in leadership. And of course, one of the things that people kept bringing up was that, remember, the US spent more than, $200 billion and spent 20 years in Afghanistan and replaced the Taliban with the Taliban. And that hung over Donald Trump. That was a concern for him. He didn't want to be one of those weak presidents who didn't deliver, that he had railed about during his 3 election campaigns. And so it's a convenient off for him. So he's achieved some of the goals, and they can paint it as a big victory. And it is a military victory. There's no doubt about that. But it didn't deliver everything that he wanted. And one of the key points that he talked about immediately after launching the war, a change of regime in Iran.
Chief U.S. Correspondent for Al Jazeera, Alan Fisher, thank you very much. Alan, I suspect we're going to want to get you in front of a camera as soon as you can. We'll speak.
So in some ways, it's been a success. And in some ways, it has been a failure. He needs an off-ramp. Will it be Cuba? What's certain, he's trying to get out of this war and seems to not know how to. The war will continue. The Straits of Hormuz remain closed. And Trump still feels the need to go onto social media and claim conversations are being had with Iran with no proof. Iran are saying this is not so and are in a comfortable position of hitting targets successfully without any way of stopping these attacks by Iran, by the mightiest army in the world. So we will keep an eye on this. And let's see what's the next move, because it seems as if Trump changes his mind very frequently. A man without a plan, for me. And Iran have their plan. They've been waiting for this moment. And for myself, they are winning at the moment. If you disagree, let me see in the comments. But for me, this war will continue. So long if America still attack. And I might add, the Iranians are keeping within international law with all their attacks. And this should be not claimed as an attack. I must correct myself. This is retaliation. This is retaliation. They were under attack and are now retaliating in kind. Another 48 hours. That's it from me. Catch you soon. JTV, like, share, and subscribe. Comment, comment, comment. Thank you.